The blood-curdling shriek echoed through the observation deck, causing the alien students to instinctively huddle together as the predator hurled itself against the reinforced glass barrier. Nick Orin remained perfectly still, his eyes locked with the creature's four glowing yellow ones, while the rest of the class cowered behind protective desks. "Everyone remain calm," Professor Xylox commanded, her three appendages adjusting the environmental controls. "This is exactly the reaction we expected." Nick tried to steady his breathing. The creature known as a Vexthran hunter to the rest of the galaxy, but just introduced to Earth's scientific classification system last year, was easily twice his size with muscle-bound limbs designed for tearing prey apart. Its mottled gray-green skin rippled as it paced back and forth, those unnerving eyes never leaving his. "Professor," whispered Glip, a gelatinous exchange student from Proxima Centauri, "why is the hunter so fixated on the human?" "The database says they typically ignore species without significant threat potential." "An excellent observation." Professor Xylox's voice modulator brightened with academic enthusiasm, completely inappropriate given the 7-foot killing machine attempting to break through supposedly impenetrable glass. "That's precisely why Earth Representative Orin is joining our xenobiology program this semester. Humans present a unique case study." Nick hadn't wanted to be a unique case study. He'd wanted to be the first human accepted to the Galactic Academic Exchange to learn about extraterrestrial biology from the foremost experts in the Milky Way. Now 28 alien students were staring at him like he was the main attraction. The Vexthran slammed against the glass again. A thin crack appeared. "Professor?" Several voices cried in alarm. "Impossible," the professor muttered, all three of her eyes widening. "That's quantum-stabilized transparasteel. Nothing short of a neutron bomb should another slam." The crack widened, Nick's heart hammered in his chest. "Professor, I think we need to evacuate." "Nonsense," Professor Xylox waved a dismissive appendage. "This is an unprecedented learning opportunity. The hunter appears to be demonstrating territorial behavior typically reserved for apex predators. Students, record your observations." The alien students reluctantly activated their data tablets, though most kept glancing nervously between Nick and the increasingly agitated predator. "Professor," Nick said through gritted teeth, "that thing is going to break through." A third impact. The crack spiderwebbed across the entire panel. "Evacuation protocol initiated," announced the station's AI. "All personnel proceed to emergency transport chambers. Containment breach imminent in observation deck 7. The students scrambled toward the exit, a chaotic mass of tentacles, limbs, and gelatinous bodies pushing through the doorway. Professor Xylox reluctantly followed, pausing at the threshold. "Orin, come immediately." Nick started to move, but the creature's eyes tracked him, and it positioned itself directly at the point where the glass was weakening. If he ran for the door, he'd be directly in its path when the barrier failed. "Go," he shouted. "I need to find another way." The professor hesitated for just a moment before the station's safety protocols overrode her academic curiosity and sealed the classroom door, leaving Nick alone with the predator. The next impact shattered the barrier completely. Glass like shards exploded inward as the Vexthran hunter launched itself into the room, landing with surprising grace given its massive size. Up close, Nick could see the intricate patterns of its rough hide, the gleam of intelligence in those four yellow eyes, the rows of serrated teeth as it opened its jaw and released a sound somewhere between a roar and a hiss. Nick backed away slowly. His xenobiology training told him to avoid sudden movements, to maintain eye contact, to appear as non-threatening as possible. His human instinct told him to run like hell. The creature advanced, sniffing the air. It was smelling him, he realized. According to the brief orientation materials, Vexthran hunters had olfactory senses that could detect pheromones, blood types, even genetic abnormalities. What did it smell on him? Easy, Nick said, knowing the creature couldn't understand English but hoping his tone might communicate something. "I'm not a threat to you." The Vexthran snarled, a sound so primal it seemed to bypass Nick's ears and strike directly at the most ancient parts of his brain. He fought the urge to curl into a ball. Instead, he slowly, deliberately raised his empty hands. The predator paused. Its head tilted slightly. Nick remembered something from his preliminary studies. Vexthran hunters communicated dominance hierarchies through body language. The raising of hands could be interpreted as surrender or non-aggression. He maintained the posture, keeping his breathing as steady as possible despite the terror coursing through him. The creature took another step forward, its massive clawed feet scraping against the metal floor. It lowered its head slightly, bringing those terrible eyes level with Nick's. Then, to his complete shock, it bowed its head, not just a slight nod, but a full, deliberate lowering of its massive skull, exposing the vulnerable back of its neck. Nick stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. A slow hissing noise came from the observation deck's emergency access panel. Nick glanced over to see the door sliding open, revealing a dozen wide-eyed alien students watching the impossible interaction. "It submitted to him," whispered Glip, his gelatinous body quivering with excitement. The apex predator submitted to the human. Professor Xylox pushed her way through. "Remarkable, in 300 cycles of xenobiology studies I've never witnessed." She trailed off, all three eyes fixed on the scene before her. The Vexthran hunter remained in its submissive posture for several more seconds before straightening. It gave Nick one final look, then turned and leapt back through the shattered observation window, disappearing into the habitat beyond. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Nick's pounding heart and the soft whir of the students' recording devices. "Mr. Orin," Professor Xylox finally said, "it seems we have grossly underestimated your species." Nick swallowed hard. "What just happened?" "That," the professor replied, "is precisely what we intend to find out." The following day, Nick found himself in the center of an impromptu research council. What should have been a normal day of classes had transformed into an intensive investigation with him as both subject and participant. "The hormone analysis is complete," announced Trill, a spindly insectoid student specializing in biochemistry. She displayed a holographic chart of Nick's blood work. "The human produces a unique compound similar to the dominant pheromone in Vexthran matriarchs." Professor Xylox circled Nick, her appendages tapping thoughtfully against her exoskeleton. "That might explain the submission behavior, but not the initial aggression. The hunter should have recognized the chemical signature immediately." "Unless," offered Mevox, a crystalline being whose translucent body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. The human's other biological markers triggered competing responses. Nick shifted uncomfortably on the examination platform. "Can someone please explain what this means in simple terms? Why did that thing try to kill me and then suddenly bow?" The alien students exchanged glances, a complicated silent communication that Nick still couldn't fully interpret despite his diplomatic training. "We believe," Professor Xylox said carefully, "that you present a biological paradox to the Vexthran hunter. Your body chemistry simultaneously registers as prey and as a superior predator." "That's impossible," Nick protested. "Humans are nowhere near as physically powerful as those things." Glip oozed forward, his gelatinous form reshaping to better address Nick at eye level. "Physical strength is only one metric of predatory status, Nick. The Vexthran evolved on a world with complex hierarchies. Sometimes dominance is established through chemical markers, not just brute force." "So what does this mean for the research program?" Nick asked. Professor Xylox's mouth parts clicked excitedly. "It means we have an unprecedented opportunity. With your permission, we would like to conduct controlled interaction studies between you and the Vexthran hunter." Nick's stomach dropped. "You want me to go back in there?" "With that thing, with proper safety protocols, of course," the professor assured him. "The implications for interspecies relations could be groundbreaking. Humans have only been part of the galactic community for 3 years. This discovery could accelerate Earth's integration by decades." The weight of responsibility settled on Nick's shoulders. He had been selected as Earth's representative not just for his academic achievements, but for his willingness to serve as a bridge between worlds. If this strange connection with the predator species could help humanity's position in the galactic hierarchy. "I'll do it," he said, "but I want real safety measures this time, not just glass that the creature can break through." "Absolutely," Professor Xylox agreed. "We'll design a proper research protocol with multiple fail-safes." Nick nodded, trying to ignore the churning in his gut. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," the professor announced. "First, we need to properly name your new research subject." "It has a name?" Nick asked. "Not yet," Professor Xylox replied. "As the focus of its submission behavior, you have the honor of designation." Nick thought about the creature's fierce eyes, its power, and the surprising moment of connection. "Thorn," he said finally. "Let's call it Thorn." The controlled environment chamber was nothing like the classroom observation deck. 3 separate force fields could be activated between Nick and the habitat area, and armed security drones hovered discreetly in the corners. The entire xenobiology class, along with several faculty members and even the academy director, observed from a separate chamber. "Remember your training," Professor Xylox instructed through Nick's earpiece. "Maintain eye contact but keep your posture relaxed. We'll release Thorn in 30 seconds." Nick stood in the center of the circular chamber, his heart racing despite the safety measures. The distant door to the predator habitat slid open. Nothing happened for several long moments. Then a shadow moved in the darkness beyond the doorway. Thorn emerged slowly, cautiously. In the clear light of the research chamber, Nick could see details he'd missed before the intricate scarring across its hide telling stories of past battles. The surprising dexterity in its clawed hands, the way its nostrils flared as it caught his scent. The creature's eyes locked onto him immediately. "Heart rate elevated but stable," reported Mevox from the observation room. "The Vexthran is displaying controlled investigative behavior, not aggression." Thorn approached the first boundary line, marked on the floor the point where the first force field would activate if Nick triggered the emergency protocol. The creature stopped precisely at this line, as if sensing the invisible threshold. "Remarkable spatial awareness," Professor Xylox murmured. "Nick, attempt verbal communication." Nick cleared his throat. "Hello, Thorn." The predator's head tilted, its 4 eyes blinking in an unsynchronized pattern. It made a low rumbling sound, not the snarl from before, but something softer. "Continue," urged the professor. "My name is Nick," he said, feeling slightly foolish talking to a creature that couldn't possibly understand English. "I'm from Earth." Thorn's nostrils flared again. It took another step forward, crossing the first boundary line. The observers tensed, but Nick remained calm. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature stopped 3 meters away, close enough that Nick could feel the heat radiating from its massive body, could smell its musky, alien scent. Slowly, deliberately, Thorn lowered its head in the same submissive gesture as before. This time, acting on instinct, Nick reached out his hand. "Nick, what are you doing?" Professor Xylox's voice held a note of alarm. He ignored her, keeping his hand extended, palm down, fingers relaxed. Thorn raised its head slightly, eyeing the offered hand. Then, with surprising gentleness, it pressed its forehead against Nick's palm. The contact sent a jolt through Nick's system, not pain, but a strange, tingling sensation that spread up his arm and across his chest. "Bioelectric field detected," Trill's excited voice came through the earpiece. "The Vexthran is initiating neural communication." The tingling intensified, and suddenly Nick felt something, not words, not images, but impressions, curiosity, recognition, respect. "It's communicating," Nick whispered, amazed. "I can feel it." "What is it saying?" Professor Xylox demanded. Nick struggled to interpret the alien sensations. "It's not exactly saying anything. It's more like emotions. It recognizes something in me, something familiar but different." The connection continued for nearly a minute before Thorn gently pulled away. The creature regarded Nick for a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward the habitat door. "Wait," Nick called. Thorn paused, looking back over its shoulder. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Nick asked, feeling strangely bereft as the connection faded. The predator made that soft, rumbling sound again, then disappeared into the darkness of the habitat. The observation room erupted in excited chatter. Professor Xylox rushed into the chamber, her appendages waving frantically. "This changes everything," she exclaimed. Direct neural communication between species without technological assistance. The Academy Board will need to be notified immediately. We must expand the research parameters, Professor, Nick interrupted, still processing what had happened. I think Thorn was trying to tell me something specific. Something important, the professor paused. What do you mean? I don't know yet, Nick admitted, but I got the feeling there was more, like it was just the beginning of a conversation. Then we must continue the dialogue, Professor Xylox declared, daily sessions increasing in duration. We'll monitor the neural patterns, try to establish a translation matrix. I think, Nick said carefully, it needs to be just me and Thorn, at least for now. Too many observers might interfere with the connection. The professor's appendages twitched with scientific frustration, but she nodded reluctantly. Very well, but we'll maintain remote monitoring for safety purposes. Agreed, Nick said, his mind already turning to tomorrow's session and what mysteries awaited in that strange mental connection. The next 2 weeks saw Nick and Thorn establishing a remarkable rapport. Each session grew longer, the neural communication deeper and more complex. The alien students watched with fascination as the human and the predator developed what could only be described as a friendship. The neural pathways are synchronizing, Trill reported, displaying brain scan comparisons. It's as if they're developing a shared language. Nick had come to understand that the Vexthran communicated primarily through emotional impressions and memory fragments. Words were secondary in their culture, used mainly for practical information rather than deeper concepts. Thorn is teaching me about his world, Nick explained to the research team. Their social structures, hunting patterns, even their history. His world, Professor Xylox questioned. You've determined the specimen is male, Nick nodded. Yes, and he's actually young, only about 15 Earth years old. He was captured during a coming-of-age ritual. This information caused a stir among the researchers. No one had known the age or circumstances of the predator's capture. The specimen had been acquired through an exchange with another research facility. What else have you learned? Asked Glip, who had become particularly invested in the project. Nick hesitated. Thorn isn't just any Vexthran. He's from a royal bloodline. His mother is what they call a first hunter, something like a queen. That's why he recognized the chemical similarities in my blood. Apparently, there's a compound in human adrenaline that mimics their royal pheromone. The implications of this revelation were significant. If humans naturally produced compounds similar to Vexthran royalty, it could explain why the predator had shown submission. It also raised questions about potential diplomatic relations with a species previously considered too primitive for formal contact. We need to report this to the Galactic Council immediately, Professor Xylox insisted. This could establish humans as natural intermediaries with the Vexthran. Nick frowned. There's something else. Thorn didn't end up here by accident. He believes he was deliberately sold into captivity by a rival clan. The room fell silent. That would imply a level of interstellar awareness we didn't think the Vexthran possessed, Mevok said slowly. They're more connected to galactic affairs than anyone realized, Nick confirmed. According to Thorn, certain factions have been trading with smugglers for generations. They've been observing us all along. Professor Xylox's appendages trembled slightly. If this is true, the ethical implications of keeping a royal Vexthran in captivity are significant, Nick finished. Which is why I think we need to consider releasing him. The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. The Academy had invested considerable resources in acquiring the rare specimen. More importantly, a free Vexthran could pose a danger to the station. Out of the question, declared Director Phobos, who had joined the meeting upon hearing Nick's revelations. The specimen is Academy property and invaluable to ongoing research. Nick clenched his jaw. His name is Thorn, not the specimen, and he's an intelligent being, not property. Mr. Orin, the director said coldly, you are here as a student, not to dictate Academy policy on research assets. The Vexthran remains in containment, and that is final. Nick looked around the room, seeing the conflict on the alien students' faces. Many had come to respect the connection he'd formed with Thorn, but challenging Academy authority was serious. "I understand," Nick said finally, though his mind was already forming a plan. "May I at least continue the communication sessions? There's still much to learn." Director Phobos nodded curtly. "The research will continue under stricter protocols, no more private sessions. Full observation at all times." As the meeting dispersed, Glip oozed beside Nick in the corridor. "You're planning something," the gelatinous student observed quietly. Nick glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I can't leave him there, not now that I know the truth." "The Academy security systems are among the most sophisticated in the galaxy," Glip warned. "And even if you could release him, where would he go?" "I'm working on that," Nick admitted. "But I need help." Glip's form rippled with nervous energy. "What you're suggesting is against Academy regulations. We could all be expelled." "I know. That's why I won't ask you to get involved. But if you happen to know anything about the security protocols for the habitat section." Glip was silent for a long moment. Finally, a small data chip emerged from his gelatinous body. "I never gave you this," he said, "and if asked, I will deny any knowledge of your actions." Nick took the chip, slipping it into his pocket. "Thank you. Be careful," Glip warned. "The director is not known for mercy toward those who defy him." 3 days later, Nick stood before the habitat entrance during the station's night cycle. The security override codes from Glip's chip had worked so far, but he knew he had limited time before the system detected the unauthorized access. The habitat door slid open. Nick stepped inside, activating the small light on his wrist device. "Thorn," he called softly. "It's me." A shadow moved in the darkness, and then Thorn was there, his 4 eyes gleaming in the dim light. Nick reached out, and they established their neural connection. Immediately, Nick sensed confusion and concern. "I know they changed the protocols," Nick explained, projecting images of the meeting, the director's decision. "That's why I'm here now. I'm going to help you escape." Surprise and gratitude flowed through the connection, followed by a question: how? "There's a research vessel docking tomorrow for supply transfer. I've arranged for you to be hidden aboard. It can take you to the outer rim where you'll have a chance to contact your people." Doubt and worry emanated from Thorn. The plan was risky. "It's our only chance," Nick insisted. "The director won't ever release you willingly. This might be your only opportunity to return home." Determination replaced the doubt. Thorn was ready. Nick pulled a small device from his pocket, a portable shield generator that would temporarily mask Thorn's biosignature from the station's sensors. "This will hide you for about 20 minutes. We need to move quickly." As they prepared to leave the habitat, an alarm suddenly blared. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the corridor. "Security breach detected in habitat section," announced the station's AI. "Lockdown protocols initiated." Nick's heart raced. "They've discovered us sooner than I expected. We need to hurry." They ran through the corridors, avoiding the main passages where security would be heaviest. The shield generator hummed as it worked to conceal Thorn's massive presence. "The cargo bay is 2 levels down," Nick said, guiding them toward a maintenance shaft. "The research vessel is already docked." As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Professor Xylox and 3 security drones. "Mr. Orin," the professor said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "What have you done?" "What was right," Nick replied, stepping protectively in front of Thorn. "He's not a specimen to be studied. He's a person with rights and a home." "The director has ordered your immediate detention," Professor Xylox said. "Please do not resist." Nick felt Thorn tense behind him, ready to attack. He sent a calming impression through their connection. Violence would only make things worse. "Professor," Nick said carefully, "you've seen our connection. You know Thorn is intelligent, aware. Can you really justify keeping him captive?" The professor's appendages twitched uncomfortably. "The Academy protocols are clear regarding research specimens, but that's just it," Nick interrupted. "He's not just a specimen, you know that now. This is your chance to do the right thing, to show that science can be ethical as well as rigorous." Professor Xylox hesitated, her three eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep thought among her species. The security drones hovered menacingly. "Professor Xylox," came Director Phobos's voice over the station comm system. "Have you detained the human and secured the specimen?" The professor looked at Nick, then at Thorn, who had lowered his head in a gesture she now understood was not just submission but respect. "The situation is more complex than initially reported," she replied carefully. "I require additional time to assess." "Unacceptable," the director snapped. "Security teams are en route to your location. Hold position." Professor Xylox deactivated her communication device. "You have approximately 3 minutes before security arrives," she told Nick, stepping aside. "The maintenance shaft will take you directly to Cargo Bay 4. Nick stared at her in surprise. "Professor, I will face consequences for this," she said briskly. "But the pursuit of knowledge must never come at the expense of ethical treatment. Go, quickly." Nick nodded gratefully. "Thank you." As he and Thorn hurried past, Professor Xylox added, "Mr. Orin, when you return to the Academy, and I expect you will return to face whatever disciplinary action awaits, bring us what you learn from this experience. True science advances through ethical choices, not just discoveries." "I will," Nick promised. The cargo bay was a hive of activity despite the late hour, with automated loaders transferring supplies to and from the docked research vessel. Nick and Thorn hid behind a stack of containment units, watching for an opportunity. "The shield generator is almost depleted," Nick whispered. "We'll have one chance to get you aboard undetected." Thorn placed a clawed hand on Nick's shoulder, sending a complex mixture of emotions through their connection: gratitude, friendship, and something like a promise. "He would not forget this." "I know," Nick replied quietly. "I won't forget either." A gap appeared in the loading sequence as a loader droid paused to recalibrate. "Now," Nick hissed. Thorn sprinted across the open space with surprising speed for his size, disappearing into the research vessel's cargo hold just as the shield generator failed. The loader droid resumed its work, sealing the compartment without noticing the stowaway. Nick breathed a sigh of relief. The first part of the plan had worked. Now he just had to. "Human Nicholas Orin," announced a stern voice behind him. "You are detained pending disciplinary review." Nick turned to find Director Phobos accompanied by 6 security officers. The director's compound eyes glittered with anger. "Where is the specimen?" he demanded. "Gone," Nick said simply, "returning to where he belongs." "You have violated multiple Academy protocols and stolen valuable Academy property," the director said coldly. "The consequences will be severe." Nick stood tall despite his fear. "I did what was right. Thorn deserved freedom, not a lifetime of captivity and study." "Your human ethics have no place in Academy science," the director sneered. "Your species' participation in the exchange program will be reconsidered after this incident." A new voice joined the conversation. "Actually, Director, I believe this incident will enhance human participation in galactic affairs." Professor Xylox approached, followed by the entire xenobiology class. They formed a semicircle behind Nick, a silent show of support. "What is the meaning of this?" the director demanded. "We have been broadcasting the events of tonight, including your characterization of an intelligent being as property to the Galactic Ethics Committee," Professor Xylox explained calmly. "They have expressed significant interest in reviewing our research methods." The director's mandibles clicked in alarm. "You dare." "Additionally," continued the professor, "Mr. Orin's demonstration of interspecies empathy and ethical reasoning has proven to be an invaluable lesson to our students. I propose that instead of punishment, his actions be recognized as an advancement in our understanding of proper scientific protocols when dealing with sentient subjects." The alien students murmured agreement, many nodding or making equivalent gestures of support according to their physiologies. "This is unprecedented," the director sputtered. "As is much of true scientific progress," Professor Xylox replied. "The Academy can choose to lead this ethical evolution or be left behind by it." Nick looked at the assembled students in amazement. They had risked their academic futures to support him. "The committee will review all evidence," the director finally said, his tone resigned. Until then, Mr. Orin remains restricted to Academy grounds. As the security officers escorted Nick away, Glip oozed forward to match his pace. Was it worth it? The gelatinous student asked quietly. Nick thought of Thorn, now on his way to freedom, and the connection they had formed, a bridge between species that had changed them both. Absolutely, he replied. 3 months later, Nick stood before the Galactic Academic Review Board, his case having become something of a cause célèbre throughout educated circles in the Alliance. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, including, to Nick's surprise, a delegation of Vexthran. At their head stood a massive female with intricate scarring that spoke of countless victories. The first hunter herself had come to witness the proceedings. Nicholas Orin of Earth, began the board chairperson, a luminous being whose form constantly shifted between states of matter. You stand before us having both violated and upheld our most sacred principles. The contradiction has forced us to re-examine our assumptions about research ethics and interspecies relations. Nick swallowed nervously. I accept whatever judgment the board deems appropriate. Before we render our decision, the chairperson continued, the Vexthran delegation has requested to address this gathering. The first hunter stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate silence. She spoke in the complex language of her people, which was translated through the chamber's systems. The human Nicholas Orin returned my son to me, she said, her voice deep and powerful even through translation. In doing so, he demonstrated qualities we had not believed existed outside our own kind: courage, honor, and respect for the natural order. These actions have caused us to reconsider our place in the greater community of worlds. Murmurs spread through the chamber. For generations, we have observed from the shadows, trading with those who would exploit our skills but never engaging as equals. The humans' actions have shown us another path. The Vexthran Confederacy formally requests observer status within the Galactic Alliance, with the intention of full membership within 5 cycles. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Vexthran, long considered too primitive and aggressive for formal diplomatic relations, were voluntarily joining the interstellar community. The chairperson's form pulsed with what Nick had come to recognize as excitement. This is an historic development. And it seems we have Mr. Orin to thank for this diplomatic breakthrough. There is more, the first hunter continued. As a gesture of our commitment, we offer the services of our hunters as guardians for joint scientific expeditions to volatile regions. Knowledge and strength combined in partnership. The scientific representatives in the chamber could barely contain their enthusiasm. Access to previously 2 dangerous research locations, protected by the galaxy's most effective predators, was an unprecedented opportunity. In light of these developments, the chairperson announced, the board finds that while Nicholas Orin's methods were unorthodox and contrary to established protocol, the outcomes have served the greater interests of science and diplomacy. All charges are dismissed. Relief washed over Nick. He would not be sent back to Earth in disgrace. Furthermore, the chairperson continued, we are establishing a new academic discipline, ethical xenobiological relations. Professor Xylox has agreed to head this department with Nicholas Orin as her human liaison. The program will train the next generation of researchers in balancing scientific inquiry with ethical treatment of all intelligent life forms. The chamber erupted in applause expressed in various ways according to each species' physiology, from actual clapping to luminescent pulses to harmonic vibrations. As the formal proceedings concluded, Nick found himself approached by a familiar figure, Thorn, now dressed in ceremonial Vexthran attire that marked his royal status. They touched foreheads in the greeting they had established, and the neural connection bloomed between them once more: pride. Friendship, gratitude, the emotions flowed clearly even without words. I didn't know if I'd see you again, Nick said, smiling through their connection. Thorn communicated something new: a future. Images of humans and Vexthran working together, exploring, learning from each other. Not just Nick and Thorn, but their peoples. Ambassador Orin, called Professor Xylox, approaching with Glip and several other students from their class. "It appears you have additional responsibilities beyond your academic ones." "Ambassador?" Nick questioned. "The Vexthran have specifically requested you as Earth's diplomatic representative to their world," the professor explained. "The first of your kind to formally visit their homeworld." Nick looked at Thorn, who radiated pleased confirmation. "It seems," Professor Xylox said, her voice tinged with academic satisfaction, "that our observation deck incident was merely the first chapter in a much longer story." Nick thought back to that moment when the predator had snarled, then bowed its head to him. Neither of them could have imagined where that strange connection would lead to freedom for one, a new purpose for the other, and a bridge between worlds for all. "The best scientific discoveries," Nick said, repeating words Professor Xylox had often told their class, "are the ones that raise more questions than they answer." "Indeed," the professor agreed. "And it appears you and your Vexthran friend have given us questions enough to last generations." As the gathered beings dispersed to celebrate this new alliance, Nick and Thorn remained connected. Two unlikely friends whose bond had changed the course of galactic history, proof that understanding could be found in the most unexpected encounters. And that sometimes, the most important scientific breakthrough was simply recognizing the personhood in every being, no matter how alien they might appear.